Welcome back to Face the Nation. Neal Katyal was acting Solicitor General under President Obama, and he lays out the argument for removing President Trump from office in his new book, Impeach, the Case Against Donald Trump. And Neal is here with us in studio now. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, obviously, title says it all in terms of where you are on this issue. From what you heard from Adam Schiff, the chairman of House Intelligence, and the argument he is laying out, would you advise him to stay narrowly focused on Ukraine or to include other things in these articles?
So the book argues that it should be a narrow focus. Some of the other evidence can come in about Mueller as kind of supporting evidence. That's how the Nixon precedent had it. The articles of impeachment there focused on Watergate, but then it brought in some other things. And here the most important thing is not just Ukraine, but the president's reaction to Ukraine. I mean, he's engaged in unprecedented obstruction. No president in our history has ever done this, saying,
what do you mean?
Unilaterally, I declare the entire investigation illegitimate. No witnesses, no documents. No president did that. Nixon contemplated it, but even he backed down. And if this president can do it, and this is the central argument of my book, every president can do it, whether it was Obama before and the President Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or whatever. And impeachment is so central to our checks and balances. What he is doing is a fundamental threat to our Constitution.
What do impeachment articles look like? What's a prudent selection?
Yeah, so in the book I lay out 3 articles. One is abuse of power, that the president was trying to cheat in the 2020 election with the help of a foreign government, using his commander-in-chief powers. So it's different than 2016 when he was just a candidate saying, Russia, are you listening, and
Republicans
stuff like that.
would say 2020 was never mentioned. Elections were never mentioned in that so-called transcript.
No, but what was mentioned was his chief political rival, Joe Biden. And, you know, the idea that a president could go and withhold foreign aid in order to get an investigation announced, not even completed, but announced by his adversary is something so pernicious, so dangerous. Our founders, Madison, Hamilton, would have cried at such a thought because it's such an abuse of the president's power. So that's Article 1. Article 2 would be bribery, the quid pro quo engagement, but, you know, the withholding of aid and the withholding of a White House meeting. And then Article 3 would be obstruction of justice, as we were talking about.
You would keep it on those 3?
I would.
You tweeted recently that you thought if you go from impeachment in the House to a trial in the Senate and the Senate doesn't essentially convict, that you should retry with a new Senate after the elections. I mean, doesn't that sound more like a vendetta?
So certainly I didn't advocate that you should do it. I was being descriptive, not normative. I said that there is no double jeopardy protection in our Constitution, and I was trying to use that to explain.
You're just saying theoretically it is possible to do this.
Well, what I'm trying to say here is that the Senate has an obligation to conduct a real trial, and I suspect that they will conduct a real trial.
What does a real trial look like?
With witnesses and subpoena power, and so the president has stonewalled all of these witnesses, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Acting Chief of Staff Mulvaney. All of those folks should testify in the Senate. They should be called. And indeed, Donald Trump should testify in the Senate. And so what's happened right now is the president has said, I don't have to bother complying with any of this. But in the Senate, in that real trial, there will be subpoena procedures available, and the Democrats can call Trump. And I think that they should.
You call yourself an extreme centrist, but given your prior work, people will say you're a Democrat. The argument around this particular impeachment is that we are in this incredibly heated partisan moment at a degree the country hasn't, at least recently, lived through. That there's no way to have a credible impeachment trial. I mean, that argument is made all the time, that this was always going to be partisan, and certainly the votes are headed in that way. Do you agree with that? I mean,
not at all. So 2 things. First of all, you know, I think my obligation as a constitutional law professor is to read each case on its own. So I, for example, supported Neil Gorsuch, Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court, and testified for him. So, you know, I don't think you just view this through a partisan lens. And number 2, I think we have to try. I think this idea that Americans are too weak, this bigotry of low expectations, that we can't even see facts anymore, is so wrong. That's why I wrote the book, because I think if you give me 30 minutes with anyone, I can convince them of how bad what Trump did is for our separation of powers and why he has to be removed.
Why don't you think the public, or at least in the polling that we have seen, has the level of conviction that you do?
Because they haven't focused on the facts yet. And the Senate trial is the place. It'll be a formal, solemn proceeding. And as a litigator, I've seen how trials change opinions.
But what does a trial look like? I mean, people think of Law and Order. They think of courtroom dramas. They don't necessarily have a lot of precedent here. I mean, this is only really kind of the third, maybe fourth time our country's done this.
Yeah. Well, we've had 18 impeachments and some Senate trials, it's not over presidents. And so I think it looks like a real trial. It looks like witnesses coming forward and arguments being made in the eyes of the
Do you really believe
nation.
the Republican-controlled Senate is going to subpoena John Bolton or subpoena Secretary of
The
State
Democrats
Pompeo?
will have subpoena power, and it will go to the Chief Justice. And I've had the privilege of arguing now 39 cases before the Chief Justice. I'll argue my 40th on Wednesday. And I think he's a consummately fair person, and I think he will want this evidence out to the American public.
Interesting. And are you advising on this?
No.
No.
Just through my writing.
Through your writing.
Yeah.
All right. Neal Katyal, thank you.
Thank you.